Hey guys, HJJ here. I'm currently playing on my Ice Wizard Sabrina Frost Eyes, and it is an absolute pleasure to get to showcase these new Ice Shadow spell changes. The new changes to Shadow Enhanced spells are some of the coolest changes we've seen in a while, but they also have some drawbacks. The way Shadow Enhanced spells will now work is similar to Spell Fusion, fusing the main spell with a shadow spell to create the new Shadow Enhanced version. This means each shadow spell now is a non-Shadow Enhanced spell with the ability to be fused to turn into that Shadow Enhanced version. This also comes with a new Shadow Pact system, similar to Backlash, where the Shadow Enhanced spells will have requirements and goals in order to dissipate taking damage like you would normally see with the shadow spells previously. In this case, Shadow Pacts work as a 3-round timer, where the caster can try to satisfy the pact on the bottom of the spell. Different schools seem to focus around using their pacts based on the spell itself and school identity. At the beginning of the cast, the spell will try to satisfy your pact condition. Think removing a shield from an enemy or removing a trap from yourself. Then it would cast a spell, and that is the first round. The following round, it would again try to satisfy that pact condition, followed by a third and final round trying to satisfy the pact conditions. Should any of these conditions go unfulfilled, either once, twice, or for all 3 rounds, you will then take 5% of your max health as damage at the end of your turn. So for a maximum of 15% should you fail that pact condition all 3 times. Personally, I think this fusion and pact system fit really well into the established lore of shadow magic. It really feels like we are imbuing our spells with the shadow magic now and corrupting them. And taking that damage at the end for failing to satisfy the spell really feels like adding that corruption to the shadow magic. Now, this might be really unpopular at first, because come on, we can use these shadow spells already without these drawbacks. But the changes they've made to our Shadow Enhanced spells, they are so much stronger. Spells now have that both non-shadow and Shadow Enhanced version, so let's take a look at these major spell changes for the Shadow Enhanced versions. Abominable Weaver does 1175 damage and a tower shield, with a Shadow Pact for traps on your enemy. It can be upgraded to a PvP version to do 730 damage and apply 3 80% shields of your school. The non-shadow version does 385 damage and a tower shield, and can be upgraded to 375 damage and gambit up to 3 traps for up to 3 75% shields of your school. Snowball Barrage has been buffed to 125 damage per pip, up to 135 damage per pip, fully upgraded. The Shadow Pact is weaknesses on yourself. A PvP Path B does 750 damage divided between up to 4 enemies and applies 3 60% tower shields to yourself. The non-shadow version does 45 damage per pip, up to 65 damage per pip, fully upgraded. Path B is PvP, and it is a path for clear up to 5 weaknesses from yourself, add a 40% tower shield, then does 430 damage divided between up to 4 enemies. Climaclysm does 1010 damage, up to 1040, fully upgraded, divided between up to 4 enemies. The Shadow Pact is weaknesses on the enemy. The PvP Path B divides 550 damage on up to 4 enemies, and then applies 3 65% ice traps to those enemies. The non-shadow version does 200 damage and adds a 60% ice trap, up to the 230 damage when fully upgraded, to be divided between up to 4 enemies. It should also place the trap on all the selected enemies. Path B does 270 up to 295 damage fully upgraded, and gambits up to 2 weaknesses on yourself for a 70% ice trap. Basically an ice feint. Shatterhorn does 1095 damage up to 1130 damage fully maxed out, and taunts for 2 rounds, with a Shadow Pact of traps on the enemy. The PvP Path B does 655 up to 675 damage and applies 3 45% weaknesses. The non-shadow version does 305 damage up to 345 damage and taunts for 2 rounds. The PvP Path B is 325 damage up to 355 fully upgraded, and gambits up to 3 traps for up to 3 40% weaknesses. Freeze Ray now does 915 damage up to 940 damage fully maxed out to all enemies, with a Shadow Pact of weaknesses on the self. With a Path B for PvP, which will divide up 755 damage up to 775 damage, divided between up to 4 enemies, and then will apply 2 45% weaknesses to each selected enemy. The non-shadow version does 415 damage AoE up to 455 damage AoE, with a path B that clears 5 weaknesses and applies a 20% weakness, then does 425 damage up to 460 damage fully maxed out, which is divided up and applied to up to 4 enemies. And of course, these new shadow enhanced spells have spell writing tiers to upgrade and PvP versions. I believe this is the first time fusion spells have had tiers like this, and it seems that to upgrade your fusions, you just need to use the standard spells elements. Additionally, the shadow spells are getting reworked. Each school now gets a shadow transformation and a shadow creature. Before, there were just 3 shadow transformations, 3 shadow creatures, and another shadow transformation that you would get later on. And this was based on specific schools would get certain ones of those for free, and others would have to pay a training point. For Ice, the transformation spell Shadow Sentinel has been reworked. This was the spell that originally would intercept all of that damage from your allies and bring it onto yourself. And so now it is going to intercept 50% of incoming damage, instead of 25% that it did before for all of your allies. It also now has a 30% resistance instead of 10%. And lastly, Shadow Sentinel also gives the caster an ice pip. The new Shadow Creature spell, Dark Sentinel, is Ice's Shadow Creature spell that does 75 shadow damage and gives 3 50% shields. I think these new Shadow Enhanced fusions are extremely strong spells worthy of this possible drawback. They really fit the lore and they help introduce these old players into these newer mechanics, plus that art looks really cool. However, the rework spells that no longer Shadow Enhanced versions, those have major issues. They are insanely weak. Why would anyone ever use the non-shadow versions of these spells? For example, Snowball Barrage currently does 95 damage per pip. For 4 pips, currently, you can get 380 damage. For 4 pips, you can also cast Blizzard for 250 to 290 damage. Without the Shadow Enhancement, Snowball Barrage now does just 45 damage per pip, meaning 4 pips does only 180 damage. Not even close to a standard Blizzard. 5 pips, and that's still less than a Blizzard. 6 pips, and you're in the range. And for 7 pips, you can deal more damage than a Blizzard. But, okay, so then why not just use Freeze Ray? Currently, for 6 pips, you can deal 765 to 845 damage to everyone. Or currently, you could just use 6 pips and use Snowball Barrage and do 570 damage. But the new Freeze Ray, without the Shadow Enhancement, is only doing 415 damage. That is 150 damage less, more than 150 damage less than Frost Giant for only 1 pip of difference, and Frost Giant is going to stun. If you want to use a non-shadow version of Snowball instead, it would only need 10 pips in order to be better than the non-shadow Freeze Ray. It is insane how bad these spells are. No one is ever going to use them. They're only going to be used for fusions. For 5 pips, you could use Abominable Weaver and do 385 damage and get a tower shield, or you could just Blighthound for at least 50 more damage for the same price. Climaclysm does do that 200 damage to the enemy, but then you have to divide it up, but then it will add that 60% ice trap. That trap is kind of nice, but does it really warrant 2 whole pips? Since Snow Serpent does just under 200 damage for 2 pips, Evil Snowman does at most 100 more damage for a single pip, or perhaps you could try Shatterhorn. It only does 305 damage for the same price as Abominable Weaver, so it does less damage and taunts instead of the shields. These spells changes seem like they change the spells just so that they are there for the fusions. They have no use. Maybe the utility might be useful, but not really. There's way better spells you can use to give better utilities or do the damage and the utility separate. It's way overpriced for that utility. So why would you use it over a stronger spell? Overall, the new ice spell changes are really exciting due to lore reasons and how much more powerful these shadow spells are. But the downside is how useless those non-shadow variants are, and forcing these spells to basically take up 2 spell slots in your deck instead of just the 1. I like being able to just have a shadow spell in my pocket in case I need the extra hit, and I generate the shadow pip during play, and so then I just have to use fewer pips and I can get a really powerful hit. You know, you could just have an easy 4 pip shadow spell and do a quick 700 800 damage as a nice player and just quickly kill somebody rather than having to wait for another 8 pips in order to do that much damage. But I feel like I'm just rambling now. What do you think? Are you excited for these changes? Do you like these changes? What do you think about ice compared to the other school changes? Are there things you would adjust? Please share your comments below. I really want to know what you would change. I want to know what you think about these changes. And also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more Wizard101 content in the future.